Welcome to the Lucky Trader Lounge. I'm your host, Danny Miranda, and we are joined today by Logie, Lou, and a new addition, guest Tyler D. Tyler, it's a pleasure to have you here. So appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, Danny, I've been loving watching the shows and the content you guys have been putting out. So I'm stoked to join this evening. A lot to talk about.
Absolutely. So, Lou, Logie, pleasure to have you guys here as well, and excited to dive into the world of NFTs today. So, first thing on the radar was the biggest sale in at least CryptoPunk history in the USD realm. What are the initial takes from the panel here, Logie, Lou, about Punk 4156 selling his or her, and generating a $10 million sale?
Yeah. Interesting. I'm not sure I have like a super clear take myself just yet. I was actually chatting with Tyler this morning via DMs about like how weird this entire scenario has been. Right. Like the Punk 4156 stuff has been the last week, really a week and a half, with some FUD regarding the IP and Creative Commons stuff surrounding punks. I know we chatted a little bit about that earlier this week. Feels like, and of course we can't know all that's going on inside the life of 4156, but just feels like very odd, very hasty to be making, these decisions where like maybe you've seen some of Deez's tweets for like hundreds of ETH left on the table. This is if you saw some of the stuff from Punk 4156, like some text messages and apparently DMs he or she was getting about, hey, we could get you 4,000 ETH for this, and just like wanting to offload and make a statement. It's pretty crazy. I don't know what to think. That's not the real.
That's the fake one.
That's a fake bot
that we thought, because that's the one that made it seem like Beanie got it.
Yeah, that was the fake one. Wow, it's crazy that that's the first thing that comes up. Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but Lou,
if you head to 4156, you'll find it probably.
It's cool. And it's somewhat surprising to me. Well, not really. Just like the way it went down, like forced this into being like the top sale. It's kind of interesting to me that like the top sale isn't an alien. But if you own an alien, then you're probably somewhat happy with the fact that it's worth at least 250 ETH now. But do you think it's bad that it sold at 2,500? Should it have sold for more? I know, like when you're looking at that, like in US dollars, it's higher. But which I know Tyler probably has a little more of probably a better answer than me on this. But the 4,200 ETH or the 2,500 ETH, that counts to $10 million. Which of the two would you have considered to be the higher sale?
That's tough. I think we have to just embrace the crypto native aspect of this. And I think it's the ETH sale. It is definitely still the top. But, with respect to is this a good sale or not, the chatter I was hearing from some top collectors coming out of NFT New York City is that there were some offers floating around for 7,000 ETH on apes. And that was just a few weeks back. And at that point in time, no one was open to those offers. It was crickets. And then here we go. A few things change a few weeks later, and we have a hasty Dutch auction. And now it sells for 2.5 ETH, which, again, US dollars all-time sale, third highest sale on the board. But I think a lot of the top punk holders view it as disappointing. I think a lot thought it was going to go for 4,156, the number assigned to the punk. And I feel the same way. I think, in a normal market, in a normal selling experience with, a couple of weeks on the board, giving folks enough time to rally to ETH together, I think it could have commanded that. But then we saw the way he went about it. He wanted a fast exit, and he got it.
Yeah. It's so wild. And actually, like, looking at this punk sales in this manner, I'd almost totally forgotten about like the zombie sales from March, and
Yeah.
any honestly, or sorry, yeah, zombie plus aliens, right? Or any of these sales, you get just completely sucked into the NFT stuff, and you forget that March existed, in large part. Man, I don't know what to think. Like, so I no longer have exposure to CryptoPunks. I still think it's a bullish thing for punks overall to see one go for 10 million USD, 2,500, 2.5K Ethereum. But I am with Tyler here, where I think you have to consider this not the highest sale. I think, punks and Ethereum are one and the same. Like they are certainly, they carry each other. One is a proxy for the other in some ways. So I definitely think that, not the largest sale. I don't think you can claim it as
Still the
such.
highest ape sale though.
Yeah.
Like it's still, that it's still the top ape sale. So at least it didn't go under a previous ape sale in that sense.
Yeah. It certainly could have. I actually like the other ape more. Number 4 that you're showing there. That's not G Money's ape, but close to G Money's ape, right?
I like the chain.
Yeah. I prefer 4 to 3 here if if just comparing between the two.
How quickly do we see this one get flipped?
Did it get relisted at 4156? Is that what I saw? Almost immediately? Click into that, Danny. Yeah. Offered, yeah. Right after for 4.
It got offered for.
No. That means in this instance, that means
okay.
Listed for sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Punk is currently for sale for 4,156. I mean, it's so nuts.
That's the real test. How fast is it going to flip? And then what's also interesting is, Punk 4156 is deep into the Nouns project and creating that. One of the back end devs also is an ape punk owner, and he listed his for the meme price of $69.69 today. So be very curious if that one sells too. Then we know that for sure he left quite a bit on the table. That feels more like a statement listing than anything else.
It's going to be interesting to see how this trickles down all the way to the NFT market as a whole, if it does, because if you get the headline of $10 million sale for a punk, that might attract eyeballs, attention, and then people in the ecosystem might deploy more capital to NFTs at large as well. But Tyler, I'm interested, since we have you here for the first time, I'm interested in your story, how you got involved in NFTs and what transpired for you to be doing this full time.
Yeah, sure. So I got into NFTs probably back in the January timeframe, and it was kind of a hybrid, partially from NBA Top Shot. So I read Bales's article. I thought it was all silly. I didn't understand it. Why would I ever pay for this YouTube clip that I could go watch online? And then it kind of started to click for me. And a concept that really clicked in my head was I started reading about the high-end traditional art market, and some top collectors literally buy paintings and they just sit in airport hangars. And they're just buying them and keeping them there for tax purposes, purely for investment reasons. And as I started thinking about that, well, why could digital art not make sense? And then when you start to think about transacting and marketplaces, the light bulb went off in my head that this is a much easier way to transact in this investment class. And then with everything going on with US dollar printing and inflation, I saw the flock to collectibles. So I started getting behind it. I got into Top Shot. I was the Top Shot buyer who got in 7 days before peak. So everything went up. My bags were up, 100% within 6 hours. And then over the next, weeks and months, they're down 70%. But then it kind of got me into Twitter and into the space a little bit. The first big product I got in on was called Euler Beats. Mark Cuban was backing it. He went on, did an interview where he was saying it was, one of the coolest new ideas. He was going to invest. So a few buddies and we invested in that project. That was another one we ended up losing about 75% on. But that was really a marquee one for me because that's where I met some of the big NFT influencers on Twitter. I started following them. DC Investor, DZ, Beanie Maxi, some of those guys who were tied into that project. And then I also figured out how Discord works and how important that was. So I started following those guys pretty closely. I then got into art blocks in, say, the March and April timeframe. First purchase was a Nimbud that I saw some of these guys talking about again on Twitter. And then I discovered the minting process. And so the first product I minted was Synapses. Those were back, 0.1 ETH to mint at that point. I then minted all the art blocks really for the next several months. And then, of course, peak mania happened in August. Everything ran up quite a bit. During that time, through a buddy of mine, Dirty Rush on Twitter, Andy, he pulled together a small group of DFS guys who also were doing NFTs, and we formed our own Discord, and we kind of built out a system infrastructure where we started tracking whale action, blue chip projects, new upcoming project drops. Lou actually ended up joining our Discord for a bit. And at this point in time, we kind of had a well-operating machine. I had done well trading, and then I had this idea to launch a show primarily because all the content was already at our fingertips. Like, we had all of this action. I was already following it all day, Twitter. We had the information generating to us out of this Discord. So at that point in time, I'd kind of been looking for an exit from my corporate career, and it just felt like the right time. So in early September, put in my 2 weeks, started NFTs Live, first episode that following Monday, and haven't looked back. So it's been a fun run so far.
Tyler, did you watch Euler Beats? Did you like frantically refresh the process? Because I'm an Euler. Well, actually, not anymore. I was an early Euler Beats holder, like day one. Like bought for like 0.2, 0.15, very early on the bonding curve, and I just remember refreshing and cursing people that burned my mint. Really, really smart. You know the Daily Fantasy Sports side as well, right? Mike Leone is a great friend of mine. I just remember him telling me that at one point in time, I think our beats were worth like 24 or 25 ETH for like a couple. Yeah. And I was just like staring and like thinking, right? You're like so close to that bonding curve, just going nuts, like exponential. And I just remember thinking like, Mike says, hey, we should probably burn our Euler Beats and buy punks right now. And I just like didn't think, I just didn't think about it. We had exposure to a punk at the time. So, I felt like I was in both worlds, but I just didn't give it enough. I just didn't give it enough time or attention. And I think I ended up making I did burn. So I think I made like 6 ETH on Euler Beats. Did perfectly fine. Very, very well. Right. But was staring at it at like 25 or 30 with like prime ways to flip into a punk at that point in time, right? Which was like a good punk then, 25 ETH. Yeah. Swing and a miss, right? Swing and a miss.
Yeah. I've got similar regrets. So you beat me to it. I was in that classic stage of waiting for my ETH to clear from like Coinbase. So in like the 3 days it took, I watched the floor for those Euler Beat prints go from like 1 to 2 up to like 4, 5, and 6, and then put a decent chunk in, probably put like 30 to 40 ETH in, which at that time I think the punk floor was like 10 to 15. So could have bought 2 or 3 crypto punks, which is just an egregious miss in hindsight.
Yeah. Hey, that's what makes this all fun, right? There's all the things that we can point back and laugh at ourselves for being such dummies. That's why it's so fun.
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned. Don't just, don't chase steam. Don't chase the hype when you feel like you might be too late in the game, for sure. And also, like, if we just would have hit a home run on our very first investment and got crypto punks, like, what's the fun in that? So,
yeah, that's certainly nice how you reframe that. Lou mentioned before we should talk to you about art blocks. Since you spent so much time with art blocks and you said starting in March, right? And we're minting every project basically then. What type of alpha, what type of information you got for us on art blocks?
Yeah, so it's an interesting market for sure. And it was definitely one that in early summer, you could essentially have thrown a dart at the art blocks board, and 3x, 5x, every mint was profitable. And then, of course, the market figured that out. We had tons of traders, flippers, money coming into every mint, and we saw the gas wars and the switch to Dutch auction. And then now we're resetting a bit. And Gosh, it feels like we might have bottomed out. And I've been close to saying that before. I think we saw some really positive signs this week for anyone who's been following the market. So the Gazers curated drop from Matt Cain on Monday. Hey, this was a shocking drop. So I guess maybe more of the mainstream NFT market doesn't know who Matt Cain is. He's one of the most famous crypto artists. His pieces on Super Rare command really high premiums. I think Starry Night paid like 300 ETH for a Matt Cain piece earlier this summer. So he did this drop. I was expecting it to go maybe around 1 to 2 ETH for a mint out. There was like 10 mints at 1 ETH. And I couldn't believe it. So I kind of started pulling my ETH together. It probably went down to 0.25, which is by far the lowest that we've seen a curated go, since the Dutch auction format started. So for the first time, we have an attractive entry point. The market took off. We saw it go all the way up to about 3 to 3.5 ETH. I think it might hit 4 during the day when the OpenSea listings
close
were.
To 4.
Yeah.
How does something like that occur? Like, how does the market undervalue it to 0.25 and then take it to 4? I saw it when it was 2. I guess it fell down from 3.5 to 2. I don't know what it's sitting at now, but how does something like that occur?
I think what's interesting about this project specifically is it's a different buyer pool than we typically see. So we've got some of the standard art blocks minters who are there for every project, but we've got some of these super rare and more traditional digital art, crypto art collectors, and they made a huge splash. So like Moderate's Art, Token Angels are two of the huge names from that space. I think they might own 15 to 20% of the supply of this project. So it's applied a massive supply squeeze, which we don't typically see. And it's one of the key metrics that I follow on Lucky Trader dashboards is that percent listed metric. And that percent listed, it was below 8%, I want to say, at peak. And when you have that situation and then people come in and do sweeps or buy up several right in a row, that's where you see the floors just take off much more quickly than a lot of the other art blocks products right now, which are sitting at like 20, 25%, 40% of the supply listed. And that's where you just churn for days and then eventually drop. So I think my take is the different market.
We talked about Gazers on Monday, and I think all of our guesses, Lou, right, like was in somewhere in the 1.5 to 3 range. Yeah, and then we actually had a team. Yeah. We had a team call like probably right during the near end. And so I did not mint, but like 0.25, how? It made no sense.
I got at 2.25. Because I think it was right when the call ended. I think it turned to 0.2. Well, there was I'm sure you were watching this, Tyler, but there was like a delay. Was that at 0.5 or was that at 0.75? At one point there was like a delay where it didn't adjust down, and a bunch of people are like, they were just sweating, like, when's it gonna switch? When's it gonna switch? Because everyone wanted to jump in then. Was that for the 0.25?
Interesting. I don't. It must have been a little higher than that because I feel like when it went to 2.5, it went pretty fast.
Yeah.
At that point.
We were like, when's it gonna switch? When's it gonna switch? It was like, because it's every 5 minutes, and it was at like the 7 or 8 minute mark, and it hadn't switched yet, and no one was buying. And then all of a sudden, at 0.25, everyone went in because at that point, it's like, how can you not? I don't know if there's even the floor of a curated is under 0.25, probably not, right? But I sold both of mine at 1, or it was like 0.88, and so I didn't ride it all the way up, but I just that's what scared me, is it got all the way down to 0.25. So beforehand, like we talked on Monday, like I was expecting I'll probably buy one at like 1.5 with hopes of it to get to 3. But when it's down at 0.25, I'm not thinking it's going to get to 3 again. So that's what worried me about it. But I think it's just there hadn't been a lot of good curateds recently. So I think people are scared to jump in at a high dollar amount.
Isn't it interesting that the psychology, sorry, Lower Danny.
Yeah, I was
the
gonna ask
psychology
Tyler.
is wild.
Sorry, I think I'm lagging a little on you guys with this backwoods internet. I was gonna ask you though about art blocks and like your take on the supply stuff, right? Like, there's been a little FUD, art blocks related FUD regarding how many collections, right? There were two. I know Playground and Factory don't really count, or perhaps like notable collectors aren't necessarily counting those. Although the Phase is it called Phase? The Darian Brito one today
Pats.
was pretty good.
Pats.
Yeah. Anyway, like, I'm curious about your take on like the overall supply stuff, art blocks wise, and like if that's affecting you as a collector of art blocks, or anything you can add there.
I think it's a market that we just have to be a lot more selective in. And I think gone are the days that, every project is just going to be a guaranteed 5 or 10x over time. Like, I don't think we can expect that. That's not Art Blocks' mission. Art Blocks' mission is not to enrich its investors. It is a platform for artists to create generative art. And they've been pretty outspoken about that and wanting it to be as open as possible. But what I think, as investors, as traders, it's our job to be much more, scrutinous on the artists and general market sentiment, and then also the pricing dynamics, which makes all of these drops much more interesting. But just like the Psychology of Mondays drop, if that mints out at 3 to 4, Lou, do you touch it? Like, I probably don't touch it. I would have been priced out at that number.
Yeah, I was hoping for it to be under 2. But I think if it started moving at 2, I would potentially be buying it. But I was hoping to get it at 1.5.
But then what's also interesting about that is, like, so then no one minted it. So you start to wonder, like, oh, does no one want this?
Yeah,
it's worthless. It's going to have a poor secondary reaction. So I think actually Skyhook, he's in a Discord, he's on our show sometimes. He was prepared to mint at 4. When he saw the reaction, he just didn't touch it at all. He didn't mint it even at 0.25 at the bottom. But it goes this. Everyone's shaken. Everyone's spooked by the recent action in the market, and I think it's no longer art blocks curated as a whole is what's going to guide your decisions. It's going to have to be project by project.
Yeah, I think this one should have been easier to eschew the FUD, given this, like Matt Cain, like you talked about, right? The super rare stuff, sold the first piece for 6 figures on Async, right? Like, was in the top 100 most influential or notable blockchain people from, was it CoinDesk? We talked about that on the stream on Monday as well. You're exactly right, Tyler. Like, there's a lot of folks that are newer to this industry, and I'm not going to include myself as an OG in any way. I wouldn't have known who Matt Cain was if I just started a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago, right? But like, there was a pretty strong sentiment or group of folks that like perhaps was not appropriately valuing what this artist means to crypto art, or the larger crypto culture, and those that have super deep pockets and have been around in the NFT ecosystem for a long time. I remember later the night of Monday night, like, seeing all the super notable people that were tweeting and picking up gazers if they had not already minted, right? Like, that should have been your little bit of a sign. You had a little bit of a window. You saw like Von Mies and like Coldy and all these guys like just jump in if they hadn't already minted. And that was it, right? That was like, all right, these guys respect this dude as an artist. I should probably respect this guy as an artist. Sometimes it's that easy.
And I think it's important. Oh, Danny, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's so fascinating that Logie and Lou predicted 2 to 3, and that's where it ended up settling. And it's almost like they had a sense for the market. But Tyler, what were you saying?
I think that it's okay to change your judgment, right, over time and when presented with new information, right? So I minted 3. I sold all 3 of those off in the mid ones before I realized the enormity and the power of some of the collectors coming back into this collection, and I've since rebought. So I think it's important to track all of that as well. And just because you missed the mint doesn't mean that you should just ignore the project altogether, and that the potential gains may be gone, so to speak. Like, I think, especially in this collection, gazers, with the diamond hand holders that we have in this project, we're going to reach a legitimate supply squeeze at some point in time, and especially once the evolution. This is an ongoing, evolving generative art project where it's going to change with like the cycles of the moon. So I think once we start really seeing some of that play out, there'll be even more demand.
I had a question that it's kind of two-part question. One is, do you think that the curated is the only one that matters? And in that sense, does the playground and factory hurt curated in that supply example? But then the other side, like today, I thought that the paths was really cool. I got one at 0.5 ETH. But do you think it hurts it, just the fact that it has playground in the name? And like long term, do you think playground and factory are like reasonable buys?
I do. I think certainly the curated used to carry a premium. I think one nice switch that Artblocks and OpenSea made is kind of removing those bucket groupings from the landing page, and now it's individual projects. What's been really interesting to watch is not every curated artist starts in curated, right? Darren Brito, actually, his first product, I believe, is Hashmass, which started in factory. We've had a few artists who have done factory drops go on to do curated. So I think when we're years down the line, what's going to matter is the artist and how good of a body of work they have over time, and playground versus factory isn't going to matter. But we're not there yet. So in short-term market dynamics, in trading, flipping, minting, it absolutely matters. It's because of kind of where we're at on the learning curve, bell curve of this from just a general market standpoint. And people see curated, they know it's good. And just even starting to do the next level of research into factory and playground can be too much for the general audience to generate the liquidity that you need for the market reaction that a lot of the traders, necessarily are looking for.
Were you somebody who was into art before all this, or is it something like you've trained your eye to identify better pieces of art?
Not at all. So it's also been something I've kind of looked back on, like during this evolution, like, wow, like I'm an art collector now. I'm a digital art collector. Like I got to get some frames. Got to get more room in my house to hang these things. I do a background in math, so that the concepts of generative art really clicked with me. Algorithm-based code meets these beautiful outputs. From an evaluation standpoint, it's more of just kind of really keeping those to the ground, reading what the primary discourse, what the primary people that I respect their opinions are, seeing what they're saying about these projects, doing some research on these artists, seeing how their work does on other platforms, be it Super Rare, Foundation, wherever they got their start, and then just seeing some. A lot of times, it's nice if you have like the Rinkeby test examples from some of their outputs, just seeing some of the tests and the reaction that those get from the market. And that was another thing that was really interesting about Gazers is no one was talking about it. No one was talking about Gazers in Artblocks, Punks, in the Matt Cain channel even, and kind of circling us back. You know why? It's because all the Punk 4156 drama. It was still happening from last weekend. Everyone was so involved in that. I think some people just missed the mint altogether.
And before we were talking about Gazers, you went deep into, you were going to go into why Artblocks, if this is the bottom for Artblocks and we're headed back up for Artblocks. And so were there other additional things that came to mind for why you think we've hit the bottom and now are on our way back up?
Well, we've seen 3 other projects mint out this week. So the playground dropped today, the factory dropped today, minted out in 14 minutes. And there was another factory drop on Tuesday that minted out. And for those who've been following, it's just been a bloodbath. If you go to the Artblocks project page, everything's open. It's been open for weeks. Part of that is because they've been mispriced and some of the artists put higher floors on there. And I think that's been a mistake. The pricing still matters. But seeing that momentum is important. It gets people excited. And then it's also just as this market as a whole, when projects do well, when people mint and have success, that money cycles back around the ecosystem, right? So folks minted gauges. They minted some of these factory projects and then have a nice return. Now they're feeling a little bit more bullish. Sentiment starts to change. The fear needle starts to move a little bit more towards the green side of the spectrum, and now they're ready to start participating more. But I think the biggest question is, what does this mean for the old school, like Art Blocks Curated? Have those bottomed out versus the new projects? And I think that's ultimately one of the biggest questions on the table in NFTs right now is what is the new money going to come in and spend? Are they going to go back and look at, the first 10 Art Blocks Curated sets and mint those? Or are they just going to focus on the new drops? And I think that answer to the question is really that answer is going to help us determine if we're truly out of this Art Blocks bear market. But, the floors are down 70 to 80% on some of the top Art Blocks sets. We're seeing single-digit prices for those that were in 40, 50 ETH floors earlier. Can't get all that much lower. At some point, we have to have hit the bottom. But it's going to take some level of trigger event for us to really start to surge back to the August levels. And I don't think we've quite seen that yet. But we're starting to see some bullish signs.
Yeah. Is this similar at all to what you saw with Top Shot in a longer period of time? How would you compare the two markets?
I don't know that I was in, Top Shots. Well, actually, that's a great question. I think part of the reasons that Top Shot had that wild run up was that it was a closed ecosystem. No one could withdraw. So everyone was forced, if they sold their listings, you were forced to rebuy. And while that wasn't, no one was forced to rebuy Art Blocks, right? The way that the whale action happened in peak August was Vincent Van Gogh was coming in, Starry Night, 3AC, they were buying these pieces. The sellers were taking that money and going right back in to Art Blocks, and it was in other projects. And it was just like this merry-go-round effect of, okay, this project's going to run today and this week, and then those sellers are going to move on to the next one. And it all stayed in that ecosystem. At some point that changed. I think it changed in October, and we started seeing sellers, keeping their ETH on the sidelines or moving out of that ecosystem. And essentially when it stopped falling back is when the floors start to drop out. And then when there's no liquidity, no action for weeks and months, that's when it's just undercutting, race to zero. Which is similar to Top Shot, right? Once they allowed withdrawals, people started taking their money off the platform. It dried up. A lot of the buying action was gone, and everyone was looking for the exits.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the topic of Dapper Labs and Top Shots, let's talk about NFL All Day. Today they released that they'll have the private beta open tomorrow for, I guess, a select number of people. Tyler, are you one of the people who is in the private beta?
I didn't make the cut. I'm a little pissed. I had a decent collector score. I have hundreds of Top Shots, but I feel like I've kind of gone through all this the emotional stages with Top Shots at this point, and I'm excited. I'm excited for All Day. I'm excited to be on, hopefully, close to the ground floor of the product. I really hope the beta access folks, don't have the same edge that all the early Top Shot adopters had. I hope it's a little bit more even for folks who want to participate, but I'm excited for it.
I for one hope that the beta users have a pretty big edge. I think it would be pretty beneficial as a user to be able to get 10 packs tomorrow. That would be fun. I mean, I'm assuming it would just be one, but I agree. I think one of the issues with NBA Top Shot is that they did sort of weigh it to people that were in earlier on, because there was never a shot. I guess, yeah, I could have thrown $20,000 the first week I was on to get Cosmics or Hollows or whatever in Series 1, but it definitely leaned to people that were already in early on, that were able to get all these packs that were in, out of 500 collections. And then now the new people coming in, everything was 15, 30K, the counts. So I'm excited to see what they have in store. I think they hopefully have learned a lot of things from the NBA product that they're using to make this one better and cleaner. So that's why I'm mostly excited for.
Do you really think they're going to have fixed all the problems? I feel like lot of the
probably not, but I'm hoping that Series 2 for Top Shot was just a mess, as far as there was all these different the serial counts for the different what do they call them, the different sets that they had, and they had all these different pack drops. They would start going down the line, starting a set, and then they switched to another one, and then they were just trying a lot of different things. I feel like. So here, I think instead of having, you have out of 5,000, out of 15,000, out of 25,000, all in the same series. I'd like to think here they're going to have it more defined. Rares are all out of X. The commons are all out of X. Just a little more structure to it in that sense. And I think tomorrow, we were talking about this earlier, the drop. If this drop gets delayed, if this drop takes 6 hours to do, if this drop is smooth tomorrow, I think I'll be pretty excited about the product. But I think that's gonna be something to watch. Is the drops gonna be a mess? Or, I don't know how many people are in the beta, but I'm assuming it'll be less traffic, which will allow them to have a smoother drop. But if they have a messed up drop tomorrow, that's all anyone's going to talk about.
Logie, are you in all day?
I'm not. Nope. And I'm lagging very hard, so I apologize, but I'm not in, unfortunately. The backwards internet is rugging me pretty bad right now.
You're good. No worries. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about, Tyler, was this crazy piece you put together. It's very all-encompassing, and we'll link it down below for people. It's called NFTs Q4 21 State of the Market and 2022 Predictions. This must be 2,000 words at least, and maybe we could publish it as an ebook or something like that on Amazon, make some money off this. But seriously long piece with a lot of graphics, a lot of data, and you went through questions and everything you could possibly ask, you covered, it seemed like. So take me through the writing of this piece and what your takeaways are today versus what your takeaways maybe were 6 days ago, or 7 days ago rather. And yeah, take us through that.
Yeah. So my New Year's resolution headed into 2021 was to start writing. So started my blog for the first time this year. Had a few topics in mind, and then I kind of hit just one post per month. And then over the last 3 to 4 months, it's been a lot more focused just in the NFT space overall. I've been wanting to do a piece. So I did a NFTs 101 blog that was meant to be very introductory. If you want to talk about wordy, that one is a 30-minute read. So it's my encyclopedia blog. This one, the Q4 State of the Market, it's a 13-minute read. Hey, just on your next train ride. But I think writing, I enjoy the writing process because it forces me to think through all my ideas. It forces me to test whether these ideas are right, if I can pull data to back them up or not. I almost always learn things as I go through and write. And kind of one of my themes from my blog is trying to make predictions. So I do some analysis, and then I try to predict something along in that topic or sector. So I think the culmination of the blog is some of my predictions for the next quarter or early 2022 in NFTs. So as I think about I'm trying to think through what those predictions all were. So I tried to answer a series of questions as I went through those to see if we can kind of get back to the bottom. Yeah. So the very first question: what happens to NFTs if ETH goes to 10K? So I don't know about what your circles are talking about with respect to NFTs, but especially when ETH ran up hard for the first time back in April, May, kind of like the initial mindset was if ETH takes off, all these NFTs are going to zero, or they're going down 90%. And I was also in that school of thought for a period of time. I no longer am. So I certainly think we have plenty of evidence that when ETH is ripping either up or down, NFTs underperform. When ETH is stable, NFTs outperform. So I think if we see ETH get to a stable level, we'll see NFTs start to outperform again. Not all of them, but certainly the blue chips. And then that leads into kind of my next question is, well, what are the blue chips? What's going to perform well? And I think the big question, I talked about this a little bit earlier, is what are the new NFT users? What are the Coinbase users going to buy? And this is one I've also changed my mind on. I've been holding what I consider my blue chip bags. So some of the older curated projects, some of the top 10 PFP 10K set collectibles. And I've watched them just continue to underperform. And then a light bulb kind of went off as I was looking at the data over the last month. We're not in a bear market with respect to volume on OpenSea. If you project out the last half of November and early December, we're trending towards like a $3 billion month in OpenSea, which is only 10% below our August all-time high. So the money is in the platform. It's just not in all those old projects. And so the light bulb kind of went off in my head. So on that bar chart, I think when we see December, it's going to be up. It's going to be the first month that we go back up again, which is going to be really nice to see. But it's not going to the older school blue chips. It's going to a lot of these new projects. So I think it's for those who want to day trade NFTs, it's increasingly, you kind of have to put the old projects on the shelf for right now and then figure out what the new buyers want to trade. And all my new friends who are getting into NFTs right now, they don't care about the old stuff. They want to trade the new stuff.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed too, where a lot of these, even something like the doodles has gained traction. It's like 2.5 ETH floor. If the doodles came out in like April, May, June, somewhere in that range, they'd be higher than gutter cats. I always say that like gutter cats, I feel like time just came out timing wise well. I don't think if gutter cats, if they came out when the doodles did, there's no way they'd have a 4 ETH floor. I think they'd be under 2 ETH floor. So in the piece that Jason Bales did on Lucky Trader about like, does the mid-tier matter basically? And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying is the mid-tier projects right now. Like, do they matter? People want the floor projects because they want to buy something at 0.25 that can get to 1 ETH. They're not trying to get something at 2 ETH thinking it'll get to 10 ETH, at least right now. Do you think that's healthy for the market? Or do you think that should we be adjusting and just dumping off things that are in the mid-range? I know that you're someone that you have toads. They're like a mid-range one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a question earlier in chat that was asking when toads flip apes. But do you think that there are other mid-tier projects that can like get over a 10 ETH floor? Like Cool Cats is kind of settled there in the like 7 ETH range. Do you think these mid-range like 2 to 5 ETH projects still have a chance of sort of exploding up to 10?
I do. And I do think the blue chip projects, and I put Toads and Cool Cats both in that title, in that group for me. I do think they'll get there. But I don't think it's going to be on the back of new buyers. And if so, then it's going to be indirect. So I think a scenario that could play out is more your seasoned vets, seasoned traders who've been here for years, or at least around the block for this year. They start to get a pulse of what new buyers are buying. They start trading it. When they have gains, they rotate it back to the products that they care about. I think the other piece, and this was my fourth prediction, is that DAO action could very well be the saving grace for some of the blue chip projects. So, I said this in my interview with Logan on my show. I think 2022 is going to be the year of the DAO. We've seen more and more DAOs forming to buy single pieces. The Constitution DAO. Just this week, we saw Pleaser DAO spin off Free Ross DAO and successfully win that Ross Ulbricht auction with, I think 1,500 ETH. So I think we're going to see more of that. And then I could see something like a Toads DAO, a Cats DAO, coming. And when they take significant chunks out of the supply, that's where you can get to the supply squeeze type scenarios.
DAO is, I think, at one point, I know there was a post earlier this week where Dingaling became the top holder of apes, but I think the ape DAO has somewhere in the range of like 80 or so, and their goal was to be the top holder. And the sweeps that we saw with apes around like the 10 ETH, the 20 ETH range was the ape DAO. So they were collecting money from people who wanted exposure and bought up the floor, and then that floor creates the extra momentum, which we don't always see with projects. But yeah, I agree with that, where it's sort of going off of the like institutional money idea. But yeah, Tony's saying when the Mutant Cats DAO, do you think like secondary projects can do it like that, where the Mutant Cats are basically trying to be a DAO for cool cats? Do you think, because I think there was one for Toads, wasn't there?
I think there is one,
right?
Yeah, and there was what, Mutant Cats, and then Zombie Cats, I think, started a DAO to buy Mutant Cats. It was just DAOs all the way down. I don't know on a micro level if one-off PFP backed DAOs are going to be able to move the market in these blue chips like Cool Cats or Toads. But when you get to the point where 50% of new projects are spinning up DAOs like this to buy these blue chips and put into their vault, that's when we can start to see more of a network effect. It also gets exposure to those projects, to everyone who's in those projects who may not know about Cool Cats or Toads. So I think that is one way that it could certainly impact those markets. And I think the last real trigger that we're going to see, that I think specifically for Cool Cats, which is going to, if they level up to 15 or 20, it's going to be on the basis of their milk token and tokenization, which everyone is highly anticipating. It's my third question and prediction here, Wind token. So, specifically, we know that Bored Apes are working on an ape token, and they're doing it slow, and they want to do it right. And we know Cool Cats is building a game, and they got their milk token, which is going to be heavily tied in to the gamification of that project. I'm super bullish on those. There's, of course, the regulatory risk, right? That's always laying overhead, that if those tokens somehow get shut down or those projects get tagged differently. But part of the reason why I like it is it gives exposure to a much larger buyer pool than typical NFT projects. So we know that the crypto Twitter, crypto investors is 10, 100x bigger market than just the NFT buying pool right now. And those folks may not be comfortable buying NFTs, but if they see the ape token, I certainly think that they could, bring some liquidity into play.
Ape in.
For absolutely. So I think that will be an early trigger to watch in 2022. That could be the next propellant for some of these that have been floating around in the mid tier.
So you basically, you laid out all the questions, you laid out all the answers, and I think we know what to do now. Now we're ready to attack. But one thing you didn't address in these really was Coinbase, and you kind of did. You touched on Coinbase's impact, but I'm curious if you could expand on that. Coinbase adding to the marketplace, what's that going to do from your perspective?
Sure, I've kind of gone. This is one I've also kind of gone, let's say, full circle, so to speak, in my opinion. So right away, I'm like, oh, this is super great news. Coinbase users are coming to buy my bags, right? But I no longer think that. And I absolutely think that a new Coinbase user pool is going to be focused on new projects and more of the floor. I think that was a great analogy, Lou. Not just the floor part of a project, but floor projects, like lower cost entry points where they can come in, find a project that they like, identify with, get into that community, and then organically see that grow versus coming into an established project like Cool Cats and dropping 7 or 8 ETH right off the bat into that project. And I think we have a perfect example of how this could play out in the past week with Ape Kids Club. So it's an ape derivative, but it's 3D and it's got that cute factor in spades. And I actually know firsthand that some of my friends who this is their first purchase in the NFT space is from this Ape Kids Club project. And I think this is indicative of the trend that we are going to see. I don't think Ape Kids Club specifically is what Coinbase users are coming to buy, but the new project drop that's cute, that picks up some momentum, that's where we're going to see the attention play.
It seems like a lot of these projects, like they get announced as they're going to be on Coinbase and then they shoot up the next day too. That happened. What was the one we were just looking at? Bubblegum Kids. That was one that did that today. I know. Do you have any of the Forgotten Wizards? That was one that they were like announced Coinbase early on. They're around like a 0.7, 0.8 floor, I think. But
they saw a great Coinbase pump. I think they might be one of the biggest beneficiaries, the Forgotten Runes Wizards. Yeah. I minted several of those. I had sold them off, so I'm no longer on a Wizards holder, which is regretful because they've done really well. But it's interesting. Like, I think the big question is the Coinbase pump correct? Like, should those products be pumping because they're going to be listed? I'm a hard no for a few reasons. One, I already said, I don't think Coinbase users are coming to buy those projects. 2, it should already be priced in. Like, the reality is all these products are going to be on Coinbase. Like, I think all of the big top 50 projects, top 100 are going to be there. That's the writing on the wall that we've seen. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. Yeah. That, okay, this week we've got 5 more of the top 50. Like, they're all going to be there. It would be more, shocking if they weren't. I could see a reverse Coinbase pump potentially. Like, if it comes out that cryptos aren't going to be on Coinbase or, Bored Apes, like I could see a temporary, Coinbase dump tied to that. But I'm not making buy or sell decisions based on the Coinbase news at this point in time.
And do we have a date or an expected time frame for Coinbase?
It's frustrating. It was supposed to be December.
I know. That's what I was thinking too.
We're running out of time, Coinbase.
Do you expect it to be this year, Lou, or no shot?
At this point, probably not 2021. No. I can't see, like, where are they going to drop it on Christmas? Like, I think at this point, like, they're just going to say, oh, it's Q1 or something like that.
That makes sense.
I know we surprised. Go ahead.
I know we had a question from someone before about the art blocks drop on Monday.
Yeah.
Is that something you had any insight on?
The one that's coming up this Monday?
The Jen Stark one? Yeah.
So I'll be honest, like I've done a cursory review on this one. I haven't done a deep dive on it yet. So I don't know a ton about Jen Stark, but I think one thing's certain. There's going to be higher expectations on this project. There's going to be more minters. There's going to be more flippers that are in this Met, whether that's good or bad. I think
because of this past week. Because
of the success of Gazers. And what the really huge red flag is the botters. So if these products get botted, and we saw it with the Sculpture project, I want to say Asimica got botted pretty heavily, and that's when, like, essentially one user bought farms and buys up 400 of the supply solely to flip. When that happens, basically all the buyers leave just to kind of screw over that botter, and that's when we see 40 or 50% of the supply listed for sale, and that's when the floors tank. So if you're watching a project and it ever jumps from like 100 mints to 600, in a very short period of time, like that is a potential indicator or signal that that's happening. And it's hard to detect live. But I think this next week will absolutely be ripe for that. I think people will be coming with their ETH to the table, ready to mint this one. So I think we can expect this to be closer to the 2 ETH mint out price, which has been kind of the standard before this exception that we saw on Monday.
And you mentioned before about how you haven't really done a full deep dive or full review of this project, but I'm curious what that process looks like for you. If you have a project that's coming up on Monday, what are the things you do and where do you research? How do you do it? And take us through your process if you don't mind.
Yeah, certainly. So the first is just artist research. So going to their Twitter page, figuring out where their other collections are. So if they've got one-of-one work that's out there, going through that and seeing essentially, is there market demand for it? Do they have multiple pieces that are listed with reserve prices right now that no one's buying? Or, are they essentially sold out, have, relatively high floors for their pieces? So that's step one. And then step two is just starting to gather as much market sentiment as I can. So that's the Art Blocks Discord. So they'll create a channel for the artist, but also just the general ones like Block Talk, the Punks Discord as well. I mean, there was a few back during Peak Mania. Punks Discord could have also been subtitled Art Blocks Discord. It was all they talked about. So I keep a pulse on that. And if there's no chatter in the Punks Discord about a curated project, to me, that's a sign that there's less interest in it, because they still typically talk about new and upcoming projects. So I'll kind of go around the horn on my Discord channels and see if folks are talking about it or not. I mentioned like the Rinkby. There's test examples of the code that you can see just to get a sense for what the outputs look like, the diversity, the aesthetics. Certainly, I think an indicator of success is generative art that looks like it could be traditional art or one-of-one art that someone would hang on their wall versus, one that it looks like an algorithm created it. It's not one that does it pass the wall test? That's a big one for me. Like, would I personally hang this on my wall? And if the answer is no, well, then that probably cuts out a bit of the buyer pool. So those are the kind of the questions on my list that I go through as I'm evaluating these projects.
It cuts out the buyer pool, meaning like you're less likely to buy it, or you're more likely to buy it because there's going to be less initial demand for
it. So that more of a long term, there's less people who would be interested in holding this piece for a longer period of time. So that's more of like a longer term where I think the ceiling of the project could go. With respect to, a quick trade, honestly, all that really matters there is the mint out price. And that's why it's so important to watch. And it's hard to have a firm stance on what you're going to do for any project, in my opinion, and until you're live and you're seeing the Dutch auction go. Just because the sculpture project is one from Peter Pasma that is one of my favorites. I was super hyped for it. I loaded up for this drop and ended up minting out at like the 5 to 6 ETH range, which in hindsight was too high for that project, and we've since just seen it come down. So it was not the right decision to mint that at 5 ETH unless your time horizon is just infinite and you're fine holding it forever. But then some of the more recent drops, when they start to get to 2, below 2, and if they get below 1, right, and those become much more attractive. Really, whether or not you like the project, at that point, it may not even matter. So like, if a project, any curated gets below 0.5, it's probably a profitable mint, at least in the short term, I'd say, just as a general rule, which may go against one of my earlier statements that you have to evaluate everything project by project, artist by artist, but there's still a curated premium that we see. And I think, other than a Simica, a few others, everything gets to 0.5 or more. So should be safe there.
Makes sense. Well, this has been a tremendously insightful conversation. Lou, do you have any other closing questions, comments?
I think it was pretty good. That the art blocks has always been pretty intriguing to me because like we were saying earlier, it's a good like indicator of the market. We during the summer, it was like the things that would pump the market was a good art blocks drop, a good like sweep of punks, sweeps of apes then were happening. And there was this like lull period. And we mentioned it, I think, on Monday, where it was like 20 straight projects for art blocks just hadn't minted out, like hadn't fully sold out. And so I kind of agree with the take that maybe we did already bottom out. But it was good to see that this week. Like, obviously I could have held mine longer, but sometimes like that's how you learn in a way, where some people are willing to hold it longer and take that chance. But I'm pretty excited to see what this Monday drop is going to be, because I think it's a decent name for the artists. And I forget what the number is. Someone had told me once, I think this is the 5th female artist that's been featured. So there aren't as many female artists that are featured. So usually when those drops come out, they have that sort of narrative behind them. So I could see that bringing people into it as well. I'm sure we'll probably talk about it again on Monday, but I think that'll also be an indicator, like you said, like if this sells out at 2-3 ETH, then art blocks curated might be back. But if it falls down again, like then what? Is it gonna fall down to 0.5 and then grind back up to 3? So I'm excited to watch that one.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll talk more about it on Monday, like you said. And appreciate you coming on, Tyler. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your learnings from a year basically in the market. And, you're basically a hard-fought veteran at this point, and an NFT lifer, a decade long in the system, it seems like. But no, seriously, appreciate you coming on. And where can people connect with you further or see what you're up to, other than the writing on the Medium, which we'll link below?
Yeah, I think the best place is Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter at Tyler_did_it. Tyler did it. And then from my profile, you can get to our Twitter show page. The name of the show is NFTs Live. The handle is at live_NFTs. I do a market show 2 times a week, kind of built on that around the horn style show. It's fast hitting, top news, blue chip PFP segments, new drops, that kind of thing. So you can check me out there. And Danny, I want to thank you for letting me come on. I've been watching Lucky Trader, the content you guys have been producing, your podcasts. I love it. It's been great to see. It's great for the space. So love to connect and love to come back on a lounge sometime in the future.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome to any time. This has been a true pleasure. Thank you guys for being here, and we'll catch you all later. Peace.
Sounds good. Bye.